What's going on?
Hi, Brad. How are you? Thanks for calling.
I'm doing all right. I'm a little sore, frankly. I went for a long hike yesterday, and I think I got food poisoning after. So I'm gonna do
Oh
my
no.
best to. I'm a little under the weather, but I'm gonna do my best for this interview to be in good spirits. And I'm really glad I could have you on the show, so that helps.
Oh,
Um,
I'm sorry to hear. I hope you feel better soon.
uh, I'm
Yikes.
fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Just got my coffee. So, yeah, life is good.
I feel that. I'm doing the same thing right now. Um, yeah, like I said, I'm really glad to have you on because I've been hearing about you for a while. I have friends who do work with you over in out west in New York. I'm really like confined to Albany, so I haven't really made it out your way as much, but I know you've been doing a lot of big things, and I was also a huge fan of Empowered back when it first came out, and I do have a lot of questions about it. But I wanted to ask, do you have any plans for another album coming up soon? Because I know you've been doing work with live bands, like before the pandemic, and uh, I think I've seen some posts about new projects you've had going. But do you have anything planned for the studio soon?
Yeah, but, I mean, that's a good question. I think as artists, we've been through a rude awakening with COVID, and having to take some time off from with music with other people for a year was really tough on me. But it definitely prompted some creative projects and virtually and stuff. Definitely had to recenter, regroup, and find inspiration again, because what I find inspiration in most is playing with other people. So I feel like I just started getting that back, getting my mojo back, if that
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
sense. I don't want to force a project. I want it to happen naturally, artistically, creatively, where I'm really feeling inspired. And having just started getting back out there again, I think it's inevitable that it'll happen. I just don't know when. But I'm so happy to be playing with other people on a stage together again. So
Yeah, I
that's
feel you.
definitely giving me life.
Yeah, well, and you don't want to. Like I said, it seems like you're focusing a lot on the live stuff. I mean, it looks like you book a lot of things, and you have a new live group you've been trying out, right? A trio. I think I
Yeah,
saw a
so
post.
I've been working with like a jazz organ trio for many years called MG3, and I right before COVID sort of rebranded the project and called it Vibe Check. Added a bass player
Yep, that's what I
and
saw. Yeah,
keys, and it's more like neo soul inspired. I mean, there's always elements of jazz in what I do because that's my background and my foundation from school, but I definitely have always gravitated towards neo soul and future soul, and so I wanted to develop that a little bit, and I definitely plan to continue developing that and put something out with that new project in the next year or so. So that's kind of my new baby. The MG3 is still out there too, of course.
cool, cool. Yeah, so when it comes to kind of defining a direction you're heading for a project, obviously, uh, you know, terms for genres can only really get you so far when you're trying to describe the sound that you really like. So
True.
when so I guess between the terms jazz and neo soul, when you talk about neo soul specifically, is there one big influence that jumps out in particular? Is it more so like a history surrounding artists like Erica Badu and D'Angelo, or where does that term kind of land for you and how you're describing your music?
That's a great point. It's so hard to describe just with a genre. I definitely love Erica Badu and D'Angelo and Jill Scott. Always listen to them. And I love what Roy Hargrove has kind of done with, and Robert Glasper with those collaborations.
Yeah,
Um, and so that inspires me a lot. Uh, but I also am working to develop my voice, literally singing more. And I feel like my voice more naturally sounds like what you might hear from Moonchild, for example, with Amber, the
yeah,
singer.
yeah.
that kind of like subtle vocals. And so that's a big inspiration for this project. And also, I really, really love brass tracks right now. I've been really into them, where, using music technology and production to layer brass and those sounds and make it really hip. And so I guess I would describe this as like a mashup of Moonchild and brass tracks. And
Okay.
Hiatus Coyote is another big influence.
Oh yeah, love them too.
So yeah, I think that might paint a better picture.
And so when you refer to your influences in jazz, I want to ask a similar question, but I also want to bring up, people like Nicholas Payton talk about the use of the term jazz, which the argument that I'm talking about.
Yeah, definitely.
The way I look at it, I don't even think argument is the wrong word, because I love the hell out of Nicholas Payton, and I think everything he says is absolutely right, and you can hear people like Charles Mingus or Miles Davis echoing the same stuff he says now. But to me, when I use the term, just think when I'm saying that, I'm thinking specifically of a history that spans a lot of different sounds, but also more so the improvisational mindset that players use. That's kind of what the term jazz means to me, and that falls under like Black American music to me, as Nicholas Payton would put it. So like with coming from that conversations kind of mindset, where do you fall as far as like your deepest influences in the realm of what jazz refers to?
Well, I think jazz is a big word, and it has a lot of history, like you said, and I definitely feel that it doesn't really point people in a specific direction unless I clarify, because it's just covered such a large span of Black American music and its history, and we've got so many influences within jazz. But if you look at the makeup of jazz, think about when it was popular, jazz musicians or Black American music, it was covers of popular show tunes in the day, right? And they were doing really hip stuff with it, and they were improvising around it and adding all sorts of rhythm and influences from Africa and other cultures, and it was if you look at that as the makeup of what it is, the jazz naturally should be in a completely different place now. So if you look at what Nicholas Payton is doing, the other artists I mentioned, you talked about Miles Davis, they've been transforming it completely. And that's really, the elements of that is kind of, it's absolutely beautiful to me. And I'm eager to see what happens next with those elements put together, because it's always changing. So I don't know. I think I'm straying a little bit from your question, but I think that it's just moldable and influenced by so many things around it. But it all definitely comes down to foundation of Black American music. If I were to say jazz, neo soul, future soul, Black American music defines all of that. And so, trying to put a genre definition on it, I think that would be the most encompassing term, really.
Yeah. No, and like I said, it's such a vague thing to say that it's hard to really break it down, because like you said, it's a big word, and like I was saying before, jazz refers to so many different kinds of sounds that you can get, and then even beyond that, every artist's sound is a little different. It's a little influenced by something else. So I don't know. I like to talk about where words like that begin and end, but I also I've talked to enough musicians where I kind of get that after a certain point talking about genres is tedious. But I like to try to kind of stretch the the definitions, in conversation. But
Absolutely, it's definitely an important discussion, and really important to recognize the foundations of the music that we play.
yeah, and like obviously you clearly have such a like a knowledge of the history that you can actually talk on the subject. And I feel like for some players it's not as clear, but that's kind of why I like talking about it with people who know their history. I mean, you've studied with some like real legendary players like Curtis Fuller, correct?
Yes. Oh my goodness, I just felt like it was history right in front of me.
Yeah.
Legend.
Now, is there a particular lesson in the realm of improvised music that you felt like was really made clear to you one day in one of your private lessons, or maybe even at like a jam session that really kind of changed the way you look at improvisation? Anything that comes to mind in particular?
Yeah, I would say for me, the epiphany really happened where I used to get caught up in the theory of it defining again um, what the notes should be and the harmonic structure. And I never really naturally gravitated towards improvising using jazz theory as a foundation. It was a lot of extra work for me to figure out what the chords were and what the notes are supposed to be, because I'm more of an ear player and I play by ear. And I remember struggling connecting the two. And I was, even when I was studying in college, I was like, I could play from my heart, and then I can look at chord changes and try to play the notes I'm supposed to play, and I'm just not connecting at all. And I just couldn't figure it out until I saw a presentation by Victor Wooten. And Victor Wooten, I feel like I can relate a lot to his approach in that he describes the process of teaching improvisation in that you start off without any rules. And you start off without any mistakes, and you just play and play and play, play what you hear, and you make mistakes sound intentional. And he demonstrated that, and he of course explains it way better, but it just clicked right then and there, like, okay, so what I'm doing with all this theory and knowledge, it's very important, of course. It's supplemental to the core, which is just playing from ear, playing from your heart, listening, learning the language, engulfing yourself in the culture of it and the spirit and feeling it, and knowing the rhythms, more importantly, being confident. And then when you start feeding your subconscious with the theory, it's more of a matter of just practicing those technical exercises until it becomes second nature. And so that really helped me let go of playing while understanding at the same time what I was playing. And I just had to trust the process and trust that everything I'm doing to feed my subconscious is something I can let go when it comes time to making music on that stage.
Yeah, I mean, Victor Wooten is one of the, like, he's probably one of the bigger teachers from just like reading his book, and I've seen him give speeches and master classes, and I feel like he's one of the best at driving home the point that music is really so similar to a language. And it's like you said, it's like you don't, if you're talking, you're not using all, you're not thinking about syntax and grammar every sentence. You've learned to talk, and you're supposed to just talk about how you feel. And I feel like that's just kind of how music is, and Victor is one of the best at communicating that and breaking it down. So I definitely feel you on, coming from his words. But I don't know. We could keep talking about all this abstract music stuff forever. I really I love it all, but I've got a lot of things I do want to get to.
Sure.
So okay, let's touch on Empowered quick. You start off the album with an intro. I think it's just called 911, and I think it sounded like the guy said something about like a guy trying to murder his girlfriend. Is that did I hear that correctly?
Yes, he did.
So how does what's the story behind that intro track on the album?
That actually is a real 911 recording from a situation that I was in, and I was the victim in that call. And it was something that the ADA provided to me for the album. So it sort of sets the stage for the beginning of my journey through finding empowerment. So
Well,
no one's actually asked me that before. I think some people just kind of didn't quite catch that. But yeah, it was pretty powerful.
It's a little heavy, to throw into a casual morning interview like this. But
Right.
I want to know what's really up, and
Mm-hmm.
that sounds terrifying, but you're a badass. You know that, Melissa. You don't give a damn. You threw all that stuff on that album. That was really the fact that you're just willing to like put something so personal as the start of your album is cool. And then the fact that you throw in conversations in the album that you have with other amazing musicians, uh, it's an interesting choice because me personally, when I put on an album, it's definitely not what I'm expecting to hear. Just like talking, like conversation about, I guess you could say a lot of it is about social dynamics and emotion, but I definitely think the album is such a cohesive and like strong artistic picture that it all just like flows and works together really well. But when you're putting that kind of concept together, beyond the music, does that feel like a political thing for you, or does that feel like just a more personal thing that kind of drives home what you want your music to be? Like what makes you decide that you want to add in that conversational element to the music?
Right. Well, this album, Empowered in particular, I would call it my passion project. It's definitely personal. It's my story from the time I left New York City until the time I recorded the album. And it has a lot to do with honoring other women in jazz and how they lifted me up and empowered me, essentially. And so I really wanted to highlight some of those discussions with some of my biggest mentors. And Esperanza Spalding inspired me a lot with this project, just from the work she's been doing and the creative ideas she's had. And so that was a big influence for me for sure when she started doing concept albums. And just she's also like presented music in an incredibly compelling way. So that was definitely something I wanted to do as well. And just it wasn't so much about figuring out how to make money on this one. It was much something I had to do as an artist to tell my story and hopefully in turn empower other young women in jazz and educate other people who aren't women in jazz so they better understand what we go through as artists and the different situations we've overcome.
Well, I mean, like I said, you have a killer lineup of amazing musicians and features, and just musically, it's an amazing album. But it's great to see that you can pack that personal message and influence into that musical package. I mean, it's really an amazing album. And do you ever get asked by people, like, just in conversation, are there people who don't really get that part of it? Are there people who say like, "Oh, why don't you just like stick to the music," or they just it doesn't read right and they kind of come off as insensitive, or is it generally? Do you feel like people have come with more of a like open-minded mindset about that side of the album?
I think everyone I've worked with directly with this album has been incredibly supportive. And Ingrid Jensen and Tia Fuller, absolutely love the concept and they, especially Ingrid, who really encouraged me with the discussions and it's like, you're doing something different. This is really cool and something that, I really want to support. So my immediate circle has definitely been very supportive. I've been my own worst enemy in questioning my own decisions, like, well, is this too intense? I don't want to bring people down. I want people to feel happy when they listen to my music and stuff like that. So I've been my worst critic, but everybody around me has been incredibly supportive. And so I think, it's just a mark in time through my journey, and I'm really glad it's out there. And I learned a lot from the experience. I've tried a lot of different things with it, and feel grateful to have the kind of support that I did have.
Yeah. Well,
it was a little harder to market in terms of, just isolating tracks, because it really is a work as a complete work, and the entire album, from start to finish, tells a much different story than just listening to one track or a little bit of one song. So that was a challenge, but definitely something that I wanted out there, and I feel more complete now that it's in the universe.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like I said, I mean, it's, well, like you said, the ability to just create something different is that much more important. Like you said, Ingrid or Tia was saying that. I mean, creating something unique, I think, is the most important part. And even though, like, that's not necessarily typical to have, like, the speaking in the middle, it kind of reminds me of, doesn't the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill kind of have things like that?
Yeah,
you know that album?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I didn't get it, from nowhere. I've definitely been influenced by other projects that I've done, interludes like that, and integrated storytelling, and so I definitely have to give credit to those who've done it before me.
Yeah, I mean, that's just one of the things it reminded me of, but it still feels like its own angle. It still feels like its own mood. It's, like I said, it's a great album. Like, I loved your first album from 2011. What's it called?
Transitions.
Yeah, like I loved, like, the treatments of those standards you did, and all the stuff on that album. But I really think the musical sound of Empowered is more, it's similar, but I feel like you've gone off more in your own unique direction, and the conceptual elements that you're, like, willing to just run with, I think made it all that much more, like, special and personal. So, again, I have other topics to get to, but I'm glad we got to talk about it a little bit. But before I move on from Empowered, do you feel like, for all the jazz bros out there, like the dudes who might have, like, a different experience in music, is there anything you'd want to share with them that kind of encompasses, like, what kind of situations you might have been in, coming up as a musician, as a woman, that some men might not understand? Is there a particular story that you feel like kind of shows the difference between coming up as a female musician as opposed to a male musician?
I would say that if you're a male musician and you're ever in an environment where a female musician joins in and the energy changes, the atmosphere changes, for example, like, and I'll say that I've heard many times, well, we don't want to tour with the women because it changes the dynamic of what's going on with us, or it's too distracting or whatever. So that feeling, if you could hang on to that for 1 second, just understand that that's what women go through every single time they walk into a space, unless it's all women, and which is usually, it's something I never even realized I experienced until I was in a space with only women. And then I was like, oh my goodness, I can let my guard down finally. Like, I can just be myself. And I never realized I had a guard up otherwise. But we're constantly walking into spaces feeling like we have something to prove. Especially jam sessions and hangs where we're not naturally welcomed, where people look at us and make a judgment or an assumption, and we have to come up there and own it. Because if we don't, just another female in jazz who's just doing it for attention, that sort of thing. And so I read an article that Esperanza Spalding wrote where she really nailed it in terms of describing that feeling about having your guard up all the time. Yeah. So, yeah, that was, it definitely sparked a lot of discussions, between women in jazz and men. So I'm really happy about that, because I think that's what it takes. You just have to put yourself in someone else's shoes and try to see things from their experience. And I'm hoping the album does that for men in jazz who don't know what it's like.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good thing for any young musician to hear, male or female, because it teaches them to see that kind of dynamic and to see those kind of things, and that doesn't even really boil down what you talk about in empowerment, because you also talk about I think the conversation with Tia, one of them, you talk about being a people pleaser, and that resonates with me a lot. I'm a big people pleaser, and it's a thing you have to learn to be aware of, and you have to be able to stand up for yourself. So I think in general, as much as I come to an album like that for the music, the just the conversational element of it still rings true in a lot of ways that I feel like is good for young musicians to hear.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. We have more in common than we have different.
Yeah. So another one of the things I want to touch on that this kind of transitions into nicely is stand-up comedy, because I have had a few stand-up comedians on the show. I'm a big stand-up comedian fan. I recently started going to open mics, and I feel like there's a very similar dynamic for women in stand-up comedy. Are you a big fan of stand-up comedy yourself? Do you have any particular artists that you're into?
I appreciate it, but I'm not knowledgeable enough about it. It's something I probably could get in the same room with other female comics, though, and have a great time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I just like to ask the musicians, like if I have a stand-up comedian on, I like to ask them about what music they like, and it can go a similar way. But,
sure.
But, I always just like to bring it up.
I feel like I've failed all comics.
All right, well, it's all right. You just, if you don't got any albums you want to shout out now, I can shout some out myself. I mean, if you're looking for stuff to watch, three of my favorite up and coming stand-ups are Sam Morrill, Mark Normand, and Taylor Tomlinson. They're three that have really been like changing the game for me lately. But if you're looking for
writing this down.
Good. I like to nerd out about. I mean, I'm not gonna get deep, but I'm gonna drop some names for stuff I've really loved recently. Whitney Cummings' most recent special, Can I Touch It? I think it's called. That's another amazing one. And the live podcast Kill Tony. That's another one that I love. But like I said, I'm a big stand-up fan, and I feel like there's a lot of similarities to an open mic. When you're looking at like a jazz jam session, or the kind of environment that you can get into. So I think honestly, the album could resonate with someone in that world also. I mean, I think just in the entertainment business, there's so many parallels that you can see. So
that's a great point. Thank you. I actually I started up a Mixtape Night with my partner recently, and we've invited comedians to join us. We kind of swapping out live music, singers, poets, comedians, and rappers, and so we're kind of mixing it all together. So it's been really fun starting to work with comedians. I have so much respect for them. It's got to be terrifying to get up there with no instrument in front of you and have to improvise like that or do a set. So a lot of respect for it.
Yeah, I'm a bass player, and like compared to trying stand-up comedy, being a bass player is so much more low stakes. Like, I'm in the background most of the time. I'm just like sitting with the drums, like trying to just keep everything afloat. whereas stand up it's so much more revealing. But like I said, I'm a huge nerd about both of them, and I like to touch on it a little bit. Um, but back in the realm of music. Actually, before I move on, that's super cool that you're doing the mixtape thing. So hopefully I make it out your way sometime to see something like that. But I'm also trying to get something like that moving in the capital region. Some music, comedy, vocalist, hip hop kind of thing. That I want to find something that mixes it all together. So good for you, because I love that kind of show.
Awesome. Yeah, make it happen.
Yeah, I'll get there. But so in your music career, you've got some heavy hitters on the resume. Is it true that you worked with Aretha Franklin?
I did. So that was just a happenstance, I call it. I was hired to play in her band as a union musician here in Syracuse. So every once in a while, a really incredible opportunity like that will come up. And, if Frank Malfitano hadn't brought her in for the Jazz Fest, it wouldn't have happened. But I'm really, really glad I had that experience. It was kind of just one of those once in a lifetime things.
Yeah, I mean she like not as many people on that level that you can get to cross paths with like that. I mean she's like one of the best to ever do it.
I was in awe the whole time.
But did you get to talk to her a little bit, or was it a more professional? Just
This is going to sound hilarious. I played an entire event with her, and I never had the chance to actually talk to her. But I think she's at the level where she doesn't have to talk to anybody if she doesn't want to.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. I mean, I'm sure it was a big event. I just have to ask, but that's not all that
she had
surprising.
a great team. She had like a music director come out and rehearse us, and then she just came out and killed it, just slayed it.
Yeah.
And then she, went back to her dressing room, and we played a song after she went to the dressing room, so we were still on stage, and then by the time we got off stage, she was already kind of in there, and I hung out for a while, but I didn't want to bother her too much. I'm sure it's probably quite overwhelming for her to have to meet so many new people all the time, and I did, I wanted to leave her alone, but I was just grateful to have the experience to at least have shared the stage with her.
Yeah, no, I feel you. That's very considerate of you, but it's still super cool that you got to be involved in that performance. I mean, again, she's just one of the greatest, and yeah, that's super cool. And another part of your resume that sticks out to me is Vulfpeck. Very, very awesome performances you've done with them, from what I've seen. Big fan of them and Joe Dart's bass playing and all that. How did you get involved with that crew?
So, Vulfpeck is comprised of some of my best friends from college. We all went to University of Michigan together.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so, I kept in touch throughout the years, and Jack invited me to sit in with them, and kind of just went from there whenever they were in an area near me in Syracuse. And I'm still kind of in awe of what they've accomplished, and just so grateful to have been a part of it, especially the Madison Square Garden show is just another bucket list thing that I'll never forget.
Yeah, that was an amazing release. If anyone listening hasn't seen it, just like it's an album, but they have the whole video on YouTube, and it's like I said, you're just doing killer stuff. It's really an honor to have you on the show. But when you are ready to release something else, I definitely I want to talk again and help you promote stuff. But I'm glad we got to talk about Empowered, because I used to spin Bump when my first radio gig I had at the Sanctuary for Independent Media in Troy. So it's nice to finally do an interview and talk to you about the album and all that. And where should people be keeping an eye out for your future projects?
Oh, well, thank you, first of all. Thank you so much for your support. You're giving me life right now. I don't think you realize it. Being isolated from the world is definitely, I think, drained a lot of artists, so I really appreciate it. And I'll be posting updates and news on my website, melissamaymusic.com. So when I have something else major coming up, it'll definitely be there. I'm also on, social media, Facebook and Instagram, Melissa May Music.
Okay. One more thing. Where does May come from?
It's my middle name.
Okay, I kind of figured. It's just interesting. I got you figure that, but I've seen people do that where it's just like they make up a name. But
right. I was born on May 1st, and so I just thought that was cool. How my parents did that. But I also I feel like Melissa Gardiner may not be my last name in the long run. With my fiance's last name. Just trying to hang on to my middle name is just something more permanent to me in a way. So
yeah, that's cool. Wait, so how long have you been engaged?
Been engaged since before COVID. Just sort of derailed things a little.
I would imagine, but regardless, congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, this has been a great interview. I really appreciate it, Melissa. So I'll definitely be in touch. But thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me.